Okay. Well, tonight I'm going to talk about a couple things, and one of them is my role as Assistant Secretary of the Army for Installations, Energy, and the Environment. But I also want to answer a question that I get asked frequently was, well, how did you get that job? And who did you apply for? And I honestly didn't apply for the job. I was sitting in an airport and my cell phone rang and they said, hi, this is the White House. Do you have a minute to talk? I actually said no, because I was about to get on a plane. I said, send me an email and I'll get back to you. And they sent me an email, and the email did say the White House and had a 202 area code, so I figured I'd call them back. It wasn't a friend playing a prank. And I called them back, and they pretty much said, our country needs you. And so that's, not something that you get asked frequently in your life. And I sort of figure when the President of the United States says, we need you, you say yes. There's only one answer. But my next question is, so where'd you guys get my name? Because I didn't apply for anything. And they said, ma'am, we're not at liberty to discuss that. I said, okay. So, later on, I'm talking to some of my friends, and I asked, said, did you guys put my name in? And one entity said, yes, we did put your name forward. And that was the U.S. Green Building Council. And the U.S. Green Building Council is a nonprofit enterprise that I helped found in 1993. When I got another call from some people who'd read some articles I'd written, and they said, we want to help define green. Because currently, green is defined as having some recycling containers in your building. We think green needs a better definition. And so 15 of us got together and worked on trying to come up with a definition of green. And then we talked about maybe having a rating system. And then there was a lot of discussion about what are we going to call it. We said it had to be an acronym that you could pronounce. And it was finally at like 1 o'clock one morning on a weekend, we decided to call it LEED, Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. And for the first 5 years of that nonprofit, we weren't sure it was going to go anywhere. Maybe this is a really harebrained idea. No one's going to actually endorse it and think it's worthwhile. But the General Services Administration adopted it, and then some other federal agencies, and then a couple of states, and it's grown to a worldwide organization now, and buildings like this one are LEED certified, and other buildings on campus are LEED certified, and I think it's exceeded any of our wildest expectations. But the thought I want to leave you with is harebrained ideas can be the best ones, because sometimes they take you places that are completely unanticipated and unexpected. And so it's something to consider. So as the Assistant Secretary of the Army, my mission with the Headquarters Department of the Army is to establish policy and strategic direction. And the position that I'm honored to hold is one of a Senate-confirmed political appointment. So the President nominates, and the Senate has the opportunity then to question and then confirm. So the confirmation hearing is a very interesting opportunity for someone who's never spent much time in Washington, sitting before a panel of senators being questioned about your life is a little bit on the intimidating side. And then they started introducing people. And the first woman was introduced as a graduate of Oxford, and that was followed by Harvard, followed by Yale, followed by Princeton, and then there's me, Oregon State University. It was a wonderful institution. 5 kids in our family. Dad said, you go there, so you went there. It doesn't really matter where you hail from. It doesn't really matter where you got your education or what state you're from. What matters is the individual and your drive and your passion and your perseverance to make a difference. So that's something that don't be intimidated by those who may hail from a different era or a different education, because I think everyone has the opportunity to make a difference in a small community or in the world as a whole. And I really work for the President. Although I work with the Army, my role is to take the President's strategy and the President's policies and incorporate those into Army regulations and Army policies. And so I have to ensure that the administration's policies are integrated into all matters pertaining to Army installations and our contingency bases. So that is every base that the Army has around the world, both the permanent ones and those in Afghanistan or Iraq or Kosovo or other parts of the world. And so they all have different needs and they all have different requirements. But the vision is to enhance mission effectiveness. And you can enhance mission effectiveness and resilience through energy efficiency and sustainability. Part of the responsibility I have is also to broaden and strengthen collaboration and teamwork. And that is both within the Army agencies, within the other services, whether it's Navy or Air Force, also within members of Congress to help communicate to them what we are doing and the way we are implementing strategies and policies, and also to help them understand our needs, our programs, and our budget requirements. So when the White House called me, they said there's two things we'd really like you to focus on with the Army. The first is increasing the Army's efforts on energy and sustainability, and the second was driving Army installations toward net zero. So with those two requests, we started in. And so let me give you an idea, of the scope of the Army. It's about just under 1 billion square feet. We've taken down and reduced square footage recently. Let me go back. 2.2 million people, 106,000 homes, equivalent of 152 small cities, and those are just our permanent installations. When you talk about our contingency operations on the world, that's probably another 1,000 or so. And so when we talk about energy and sustainability, it helps to try and bracket it or put it into manageable chunks. And so we talk about basing power, and that's the power that is consumed in our buildings, whether they be permanent buildings or even tents. The next thing we look at is soldier power. And that's the power that a dismounted soldier needs when they're out on patrol. And sometimes they're out on a 72-hour patrol. And they're dismounted, so they're carrying everything they need. And so all their equipment needs to be powered. The third area is vehicle power. And that's both our rotary and fixed-wing air assets and all of our ground vehicles. And so to illustrate these efforts, I'm going to show a short video.
Army power and energy, soldier power, basing power, and vehicle power. We are enhancing mission effectiveness through Army power and energy advancements. We are changing Army culture, making energy a consideration in all that we do. Soldier power is the energy needed by a dismounted soldier to operate soldier-worn equipment in field operations. We are lightening the dismounted soldier's energy load and aggressively deploying advanced soldier power solutions, such as the Soldier-Worn Integrated Power Equipment System, or SWIPES, conformal batteries, squad power managers, modular universal battery chargers, solar blankets, portable generators, and others.
Last year, we received notification we were deploying in support of Combined Joint Special Operations Task Force Afghanistan to Afghanistan. It was just natural for us to request those additional capabilities that soldier power provided. We're able to take something that would be just wasted and useless to us, harvest it, put it into another battery, and use it for our operational needs. So it was a win-win situation for everybody, our supports and sustainment soldiers and our operators on the ground.
3 to 6 pounds of batteries to replace 12 to 15 pounds of batteries for long periods of time.
Carry like more bullets, more water, more food, less batteries.
Definitely carry more ammo and or different mission essential.
equipment dependent upon mission and where you're at.
Operational energy is a key enabler essential for combined arms maneuver and soldier sustainment. It's the energy and associated systems, information, and processes required to train, move, and sustain forces and systems for military operations.
Look at two things you got to have to conduct your combat operations: to close with and destroy the enemy, and that's ammunition and fuel. A lot of other things you need to, but if you don't got those two, you ain't going to make it.
Basing power. It includes installations and contingency base camps. We are striving for energy security on our installations, which are dependent on power grids, vulnerable to weather, nature, and acts of terrorism. At forward operating bases and base camps, improving energy security and efficiency represents one of our best opportunities to increase mission capability by decreasing energy usage and our logistical tail. The cornerstone of energy security and sustainability is our net zero strategy. Based on the principles of integrated design, we will appropriately manage our natural resources by producing as much energy as we use, capturing or reusing water equal to the amount we use, and eliminating or reusing solid waste disposal.
Building a 1 megawatt photovoltaic solar field. It's roughly 1,200 feet long, comprised of about 2,400 solar panels. It's going to roughly put out 1 megawatt of power. This is going to wind up a very large carport, and it's going to serve a dual purpose of providing the power and providing shelter for the trucks as well. This is the first of 2 in this location and the first of 4 altogether. This is one of a kind. It's a fascinating project to be on. It's almost a pioneering effort.
After a complete upgrade to the irrigation system and conversion to a desert-scape course in 2005, water savings average up to 56 million gallons per year. In 2001, the East Range Recharge Facility was constructed and recharges close to 130 million gallons per year of treated effluent from the fort's wastewater treatment facility.
Every day, over 80 tons of trash ends up in our Fort Hood landfill. Fort Hood has a goal to eliminate all waste across the installation by the year 2020. Every motor pool on Fort Hood is required to have the blue recycled containers. It's up to us to take advantage of these convenient resources.
Through energy initiatives, we are leveraging existing authorities to obtain private sector expertise and third-party financing. The Army Energy Initiatives Task Force assists installations in employing large-scale, cost-effective renewable energy projects, including solar, wind, biomass, waste-to-energy, and geothermal energy sources.
Well, this is important to the Army because the Army's energy is at risk, whether it's the energy on our installations or the energy in our operational environments. The Army must diversify its supply of energy. We have to secure that energy on our installations, and we have to get that energy at a price that we can afford over the long term.
Vehicle power includes air, ground, tactical, and non-tactical vehicles. We are reducing petroleum usage by right-sizing our non-tactical fleet, integrating electric hybrid technologies, and exploring new and emerging alternative fuels. We are developing fuel-efficient combat vehicles, fuel management systems, alternative fuels, and exploring new materials, thus reducing our logistical footprint. The improved drop-in, energy-efficient turbine engine program will reduce the fuel consumption of more than 2,000 Black Hawk and Apache aircraft by 25%, while at the same time increasing their horsepower and doubling their payload capacity. Through teamwork, relationships, and leader support, we will fulfill the objectives of the Army Campaign Plan. We will provide soldiers agility, flexibility, and resiliency in austere environments, void of wall outlets or generators. We will facilitate transformation, providing facilities, programs, and services to support the Army, our soldiers, and their families. We will reduce our dependence on fossil fuels. We are making energy a consideration in all that we do.
We're changing our culture so that every soldier, civilian, and family member in the Army is a power manager.
And the focus on installation energy is because we are the largest facility energy consumer in the federal government. And so in the United States, my bill is about $1.25 billion a year. And with that energy bill, you take a look to see how you can reduce costs. The challenge is that utility costs are continuing to increase. Our reliance on fossil fuels and our connection to a vulnerable electric power grid jeopardize the security of our Army installations and therefore jeopardize our mission capabilities. Over the last year, we've seen a fourfold increase in the number of power interruptions on our permanent installations. And so that means that an investment in energy capabilities has got to include renewable energy and has got to include the ability to produce energy on our installations. So through our various programs, our Net Zero program, our Energy Initiative Task Force, we've reduced our consumption by almost 16%, while at the same time we've increased the number of missions that our installations are conducting. One of the key efforts underway is energy saving performance contracts, which are leveraging private sector financing, partnering with private industry to bring energy efficiency at their cost onto the Army installation, and we pay them back out of our energy savings, out of the reduction in our utility bills. And we doubled the amount of energy performance contracts that the Army has implemented in the last year. The video talked briefly about the Net Zero Installation Initiative, which is to implement a holistic way to address our energy, our water, and our waste. And so Net Zero starts at the top with the biggest effort focused on reduction in energy consumption, reduction in water use, and reduction in waste generation. So we define a net zero energy installation as an installation that produces as much energy on site as it uses over a course of a year. A net zero water installation limits the consumption of freshwater resources and returns water back to the same watershed so as not to deplete groundwater. And water is becoming increasingly more important. Some say that it will be more precious than oil in the 21st century. The most critical commodity in China's economy isn't oil, steel, or wheat, it's water. And so when you think about water, it's really a luxury that each of us here in the United States are able to turn on the tap and have reliable access to water. Because more than 1 billion people each day don't get enough fresh water to drink or to bathe in. And less than 3% of the world's water is fresh, and there's no more of it today than there was 1 million years ago, and now we have 6 billion thirsty people that are drinking it. Net zero waste is a third part of our net zero strategy, and that is to reduce the amount of waste, solid waste, to zero. No waste going to landfills. Because I really think of landfills as future archaeological digs. Because what is archaeology? Archaeology is the study of everything from yesterday's garbage to a footprint in the mud from centuries ago. And right now there's companies that are set up to mine landfills, to mine what has been dumped into landfills over the last 10, 20 years, and they're making money at it. Landfills are filling up. Landfills leak. Landfills pollute. And I'd rather use the land for a productive purpose. In the Army, that's training. In the private sector, that's agriculture or housing, not burying our trash. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. More than 71% of the trash that goes to landfills is recyclable, has another use that it could be put to. And so we have a net zero overall strategy where you implement net zero energy, net zero water, and net zero waste. And so in April of 2011, we were looking to identify net zero installations. And it was very interesting for me being new to the military because my way of identifying who is going to be net zero is very different from that of the generals I worked with. And they told me when my ideas didn't work just to come back to them and they'd command installations to go net zero. See, my idea was you ask, who thinks they can get there? Who thinks they can get there by 2020? Of course, I was told that's not going to work in the military. People work on being commanded. But we received over 100 applications. And several of those installations that were going to be commanded didn't apply. See, what we wanted to do is identify those who are passionate about it, who had ideas, who had strategies, who were looking for an encouragement, looking to group together because they thought they could get there. And since we had more installations applied than we originally thought, we chose 6 installations in each of the energy, water, and waste category, and we chose 2 installations for overall net zero to pilot on how to get there by 2020. So we called in all the commands to a meeting, and we started talking about the program and how we were going to advance it. And so one general raised his hand from one of the net zero overall installations and said, well, ma'am, we think we're going to beat 2020. We're going to get there by 2018. I said, really? Well, that's good. Well, of course, the other net zero in all category installation had to raise his hand and said, we're going to get there by 2017. So it's a competition. There's no financial incentive. The incentive is doing what's right for the Army, doing what's right for the environment, because that's how you're going to become more secure. You're going to become more efficient. You're going to become more mission capable. And our commanders in the Army do understand that. So the efforts over the last 2 years has helped us develop a net zero philosophy that makes sense for the Army. And the results achieved at these 17 installations are being gathered together into an overall document, guiding document for all of our installations. And we're going to make that public. Because if it can apply to an Army installation, it could apply to a university campus. It could apply to a large industrial park. Because what's interesting about Army installations is Army installations really are cities. We have lodging, we have housing, we have workplaces, we have recreation, we have entertainment. They're very, very large, and they have the same diversity that you see in a city or on a campus, is that they were built over many years with many different designs and have many different applications. So the lessons that we learn in net zero, we believe, have application elsewhere across the nation. On the battlefield, we're also adopting net zero because their energy is fundamental to Army capability and performance. I heard one Army general comment that without energy, the Army stands still and silent. We cannot communicate, we cannot maneuver, we cannot fight. Energy is critical to everything that we do. And so the goal of the Army's operational energy program is to maximize the effectiveness of the soldiers and the leaders on the ground by having energy-informed operations. Because right now, fuel and water comprise 70 to 80% of our ground resupply convoys by weight. They represent significant risks and vulnerabilities to our mission and to our soldiers. Right now, 18% of U.S. casualties in Iraq can be attributed, or in Afghanistan, can be attributed to ground resupply. So the Army is committed to easing the aggregate burden of powering the tactical edge while still providing the power and the resources needed by soldiers. So let me give you an example. We have a forward operating base that's up along the Pakistan border. They have no roads. They were airdropped in, and their job is to guard a mountain pass against those wishing to cross from Pakistan into Afghanistan. They receive an aerial resupply of fuel and water every 3 days. 70 to 80% of the airdrops are fuel and water. They have to come down from a protected position near that pass down to an area they are trying to secure to receive that airdrop. And you can see that airdrop from miles around. It is a risk, and they are very vulnerable, and they're not conducting the primary mission that they have tasked to do. So we sent in one of our Net Zero to the Edge teams to that forward operating base. And in 30 days, they were able to take them to one airdrop every 10 days, 60% fuel and water. And that means those soldiers are safer, there's less risk, there's less vulnerability, and they're able to focus on the mission. We didn't reduce their capabilities, we enhanced their capabilities. And for the Army, that means that those planes can be put to task at different missions. I've also all of a sudden increased my aerial assets for deployment. Now, by the way, at the same time, it's decreasing cost and it's helping the environment and it's reducing greenhouse gases. Those are the side effects to enhancing mission capabilities and making those soldiers more effective and at less risk. The Energy Initiatives Task Force was mentioned in the video, and this is a task force we set up to work with our permanent installations to install large-scale or utility-scale renewable energy to enhance energy security on the Army bases. The personnel on our installations are really focused on running those installations, the small cities, and it's unrealistic to expect them to be experts in renewable energy or power purchase arrangements or high-level negotiations. So in my office, we stood up the Energy Initiatives Task Force, and we made a commitment to the President that we'd deliver 1 gigawatt of renewable energy by 2025 on our Army installations. That's enough energy to power 250,000 homes. Of course, the challenge is that I have no budget to do this. And so what we did is we put together a multiple award task order contract to industry saying, we want to buy $7 billion worth of renewable energy. Well, that woke a few people up. And I'm not asking Congress, I'm not asking the taxpayer for $7 billion. I'm asking the private sector to build $7 billion of renewable energy systems on Army installations. And by the way, I'll buy the power from you for 20 years at cost or less than the current price that I'm paying for energy. And we're being successful. So far this year, the ones that are green have gone out to bid, and the bids are coming in, delivering renewable energy. If you talk about Fort Drum, New York, that looks like it's going to be anywhere from a 15 to 28 megawatt biomass plant located on the Army installation, powered by debris from the timber industry, biomass generated in that locality. In Fort Detrick, Maryland, that's a 15 megawatt solar system. El Paso, Texas, that's a 20 megawatt solar system. Fort Irwin, California, that's 15 to 20 megawatt system. That's going to be out on the street pretty soon. And in Hawaii, we're partnering with Hawaii Electric to put in a 50 megawatt bioelectric plant that's going to be powered by biodiesel that comes from, the biodiesel is made from remains from the pineapple plantations and some of the other plantations, the biomass generated from agriculture in that industry. So by the end of this year, we should have about 100 megawatts out to bid and close to contract, and we're well on our track to meet the 1 gigawatt, which is 1,000 megawatts, by the end of 2025. Climate change is a question some of the students asked me about earlier, and climate change is a strategic challenge that will continue to impact the Army for the foreseeable future. And as President Obama noted in his State of the Union address, we must do more to combat climate change. Heat waves, droughts, wildfires, and floods are all occurring more frequently and with greater intensity. Superstorm Sandy, the most severe drought in decades, and the worst wildfires in some states cannot all be just freak occurrences. So in addition to the potential crisis that climate change will likely impact across the globe, it will affect us at home and on our installations. Climate change will have physical effects on our installations through sea level rise and drought. Last summer, the United States, about 60% of the United States was operating under drought conditions. Right now, it's forecast that the snowpack in the United States is 50% of what is needed in a normal year. So the forecast is for drought this summer to be more than it was last year. Is this climate change impact? Some choose to believe so. It does impact our soldiers by constricting our training missions on the bases. If an area is in a high threat of wildfire, a drought condition, we might not do as many training exercises because there's always a risk when you fire ammunition that you might spark a fire. The increase in natural disasters will also translate to more missions for our soldiers at home, especially those in the National Guard and the Army Corps of Engineers. And we certainly saw that with Superstorm Sandy, where all of them gathered together to help the New England area combat one of the worst storms they'd ever seen. We have other local issues, and it's interesting because water is one of those areas that we think is going to impact our missions even more than energy. So for an instance, in Fort Bliss, Texas, the issue is one of not physical encroachment, but water availability. A shared aquifer between countries, in this case Mexico and the United States, the Army base, and the city of El Paso, Texas, is an issue. Who has those water rights? Fort Bliss is one of our net zero pilot installations, working to reduce their water consumption. And as it works to increase their efficiency, it means that they're withdrawing less water from the shared aquifer, and the result is more water available to El Paso and to Juarez, Mexico. And certainly that helps in international relations. We have that same situation as we go in various places around the world. One of the bases we fell into in Afghanistan, in Bagram, was a base that had been occupied prior to us by other military services. And they had sucked the aquifer dry, so that it was a dry riverbed that ran through the base, which meant the agriculture in that region was unable to survive. So you had a displaced populace, which is one of the resultant activities that you can see from climate change. What we are doing now is working to recharge that dry riverbed. We're recharging it from our water treatment plant, treating that water effluent to the point where it is better than the water we're pumping out of the ground. And as that flows downstream, it is reactivating agriculture in a region that has not seen any agriculture for 20 years. Those are the kind of missions that we want to have, those that help encourage economy, those that help encourage agriculture, because we'll see that they serve as a barrier against the terrorists, as a barrier against those who have nothing else to do, so they find ways to disrupt. I want to talk just a few final thoughts and then leave some time for questions and answers. And one of the questions I was asked is, what led me to this position and what are my personal philosophies? And one of which is volunteering. I believe that that is a responsibility of each of us, because you'll find after you've gotten your degree from college or your life experiences, you have something to share. You have something to share within your community, whether it is through leadership, whether it is through starting a nonprofit. I generally spend anywhere from 10 to 20 hours a week on volunteer activities, and I have my whole career because I believe that is very important. It's a responsibility to give back to your profession. It's a responsibility to give back to your community. It also enables you to form a professional network of associates and friends in different walks of life. The second area is communicate. Through volunteering, you will have opportunities for public speaking. But also through volunteering and taking opportunities for leaderships in nonprofits, they're always looking for volunteers. You have an opportunity to practice public speaking in front of a friendly audience, or joining Toastmasters, or writing articles. You'll find that you always know something more than someone else. You can talk about your personal experiences. You can talk about the area in which you are an expert, because you are each an expert in some way, shape, or form. And you have an opportunity and a responsibility to communicate. The other is being flexible. And sometimes that means being mobile. I don't know about going to Tonga. That's a little bit outside of my range. But I've lived in 13 different states in the United States. None of them planned. I lived in Arkansas for 2 years. I had 2 weeks' notice to move here and take over a position at a company. You can do that. You find that people are likable, and you can live almost anywhere. You can live, East Coast people are different from West Coast people, but that makes it interesting. When I went from the East Coast to the West Coast, I was told I walked too fast, I talked too fast, and you better slow down because we don't do things that way here. It can contribute to your life experiences. It can give you more opportunities. And in my career after college, I never applied for a single job. They all found me. Interesting opportunities, things I never thought I'd be doing. If you told me 10 years ago I'd be in the Army, I wouldn't have believed you. But these opportunities can be opportunities to serve, opportunities to broaden your aperture, and opportunities to give back. And the last is continuous learning. As you go someplace, you have an opportunity to learn from those who work for you, and those you work for, and those you mentor. And I've always found it interesting that you can learn habits and strategies that you want to emulate. You can also observe attitudes and manners that you do not want to emulate or to avoid. But you can always learn something from those around you. And sometimes it's formal learning, and sometimes it's informal learning. But I think life is about continuous learning. And so the opportunity to serve your country in public service, as many in this school are taking, is really a noble opportunity and truly rewarding. I'm proud of the work the Army's done so far. We've certainly made a lot of progress. I think we're meeting the expectations that the President had set out for us, and I look forward to the Army continuing to lead by example on energy, water, and waste, both for our U.S. installations and overseas. But before I invite you to ask questions, I have a few last thoughts. I want to remind you that we are still a nation at war, and that your sons and daughters, mothers, fathers, brothers, and sisters are volunteering to fight the war against terrorism and have kept the fight out of our homelands. You don't have tanks in your backyard. Unless you're in Boston, you don't have IEDs exploding, which is a concern for all of us as we watch what's going on. But our soldiers are returning home as we cease combat operations. Welcome them home, thank them for their service, and above all, help them find jobs and homes in a country that is at peace. We have asked a lot out of them, and this is something that I think we owe them. So God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.
Thank you. All right, we've got some time for some questions. If anyone has a question, please raise your hand and we'll get the microphone to you. Charles.
Hi, Charles Fleeman. I'm a student here. We've met.
Yes.
I was rewatching the movie Carbon Nation the other night, which has a segment in it about how the military is leading a lot of efforts in green and things like that. And the statement made in the movie is, when the military goes green, the rest of the country will go green. So I guess my question for you is, do you really see yourself as a role model for these other users, energy users out there, the private sector? And if so, are you doing much to really demonstrate your example? I know you mentioned you considered yourself an example for the others. Are you doing much to demonstrate that? I mean, I guess this could kind of be an example of you being an example or trying to get your message out there. But are you doing anything on a grander scale, I guess?
There's a lot of people looking forward to our net zero report on what were the key observations and the key ways that we are changing things to get to net zero in energy, water, and waste. I mean, some of the examples on it are one base where they said they were having waste management problems and there was no recycling in that area. And we said, put it out to bid and say waste haulers must recycle. And they got the bids. And now those waste haulers set up new businesses in the community. Now the community has recycling resources that they did not have before. And it started an industry. And so I think we can lead by example. I think we owe it to this nation to show how you can make a difference at a city scale. We're not just talking one building at a time, like the LEAD program started out to do. We're talking about how to make change whole scale in cities with the same diverse age and diverse infrastructure that cities have now. And so it's something that we look forward to continuing to educate and communicate on. And by the way, he's doing another movie and we're talking with him too. It should be coming out soon.
Any other questions, John?
Thanks again for coming. My question, I guess, is about your net zero installations and the one you chose within the U.S. Did policy incentives and or utility contracts play into that decision-making process for the ones that actually became the pilot projects?
We call it, well, when you don't have a budget, we call it OPM, other people's money. It works. I mean, there are utility incentives to do things. There are grants through all sectors. I mean, one installation wanted to do sidewalks so that they could stop some of their bus lines so that children could walk to school. They found that there is a sidewalk grant program it was called Walkable Communities, and they got a grant for $150,000 to put in sidewalks so the children could walk to school. So they have fewer buses, which means less fuel consumption, which actually also means healthier children because they're walking instead of riding a bus. So each of the installations is encouraged to work within their communities, to work with their utilities, to work with the communities, to partner together to figure out how to do things. And in many of the communities surrounding the bases, those lessons learned are already trickling out and being implemented by the communities. So they don't have the budgets. So you have to figure out how to partner or how to get creative or enter the energy savings performance contracts where if it saves energy, they get paid out of the energy savings.
I have a question right here.
I'd like to say that your LEAD has actually been the stimulus for a lot of the tax incentives for buildings. I did 303 West Capitol 2 years ago in an energy retrofit, and I'm currently working with water conservation now for the state. And I have to commend you. If it were not for initiatives like your own and the Army's, actually with the Corps of Engineers, these states would be in very, very deep trouble, especially when it comes to water resources.
Well, thank you. And it was very interesting on LEAD because we really weren't sure how it was going to take off. And I was talking to some of the students earlier about the categories that we didn't incorporate into LEAD. And one was on human factors. And that's colors, that's acoustics, and that's smell. And there's not enough science around it, but there's a whole lot of anecdotal evidence on how to make places more livable, more productive, through improvements to, and I still hear the HVAC system in here, but it's generating white noise, so that's good. But there are definitely benefits and more that can be done. And so when we made the decision to upgrade the LEED system every 3 years, that's so that you can incorporate new strategies and new technologies that come from a variety of areas and inputs from small businesses that have great ideas.
Yes. While you're going to the question, you know we've applied for LEED status for this building.
I heard that.
We're in the test period right now.
That's wonderful.
And the utility bills have been cut in half. Yes, the HVAC was a little bit, was a little above our price range to redo it this time, but that's on the agenda next time. But so if you have any connections at LEED, we'd love to get that confirmed by May 1. It would be real nice.
All right.
if you still know people there. Angie.
My name is Angela Bukenya, and I'm a student here too. I'm wondering, since the Army is spread out in different parts of the world, are there models you looked at in different countries and adopted some of their ideas, or are you going to be the first people to represent the Army in this project?
We look for ideas from all over, and it's interesting. I was in Africa this summer looking at some of the strategies that are being implemented. One of them was a small medical facility that we were building on the border of Somalia and Djibouti. And a lot of it was natural ventilation, natural airflow, thick walls, because you weren't going to have energy available for air conditioning. So when you think about building for the environment or the locale you're in, that's something that we're encouraging all of our Army Corps of Engineers and our military services to look at, is build for the environment, build for adaptivity, so that when the Army leaves or when we may leave an area, what we leave behind is something that can be adaptive and utilized by the local entities. And so we are looking for ideas from all sources. I was talking to a group from Denmark, and they've got a fantastic solar system that I'd never seen anything like it before. And so we are looking for ideas from wherever they come from, because I don't think we always have the best ideas, but we certainly have the opportunity to implement them and demonstrate their usefulness.
Let's give a round of applause to Secretary Hammack.